There's a photograph from 1960 that tells a story most people never noticed. Frank Sinatra is sitting at a table in a dimly lit nightclub, a drink in one hand, a cigarette in the other. He's surrounded by men in expensive suits. Some you'd recognize, some you wouldn't want to. They're all smiling, laughing. The picture looks like a celebration. But if you look closely at Frank's eyes, you'll see something else. Not joy, not ease. Something closer to fear. For decades, people whispered about Frank Sinatra's connections. The mob, the favors, the phone calls in the middle of the night, the meetings in back rooms where deals were made that never saw daylight. Frank always denied it. He'd get angry, defensive, threaten lawsuits. He'd say it was all lies, all gossip, all jealousy from people who couldn't stand to see a poor kid from Hoboken become the most famous singer in the world. But those closest to him knew the truth. Frank Sinatra didn't just know the mob, he owed them. And for 50 years, he paid that debt in ways the public never saw. In favors, in silence, in moments of terror he could never speak about, even to the people he loved most. This is the story of what it cost him. Not in money, not in fame, in freedom, in sleep, in the quiet, gnawing fear that one day the bill would come due in a way he couldn't survive. If you grew up in the 1940s and 50s, Frank Sinatra was the sound of America. That voice, smooth as silk, aching with loneliness, somehow both vulnerable and invincible, came through every radio, every jukebox, every record player, and every living room across the country. He sang about love and loss and late nights and lonely hearts, and somehow it felt like he was singing directly to you. He started as a skinny kid from Hoboken, New Jersey, the son of Italian immigrants. His father was a firefighter. His mother, Dolly, was a midwife and a force of nature, tough, ambitious, politically connected in the way neighborhood women sometimes were in those days. She wanted more for her son than the docks and the factories. She pushed him, believed in him, fought for him. And Frank? Frank had a voice that could stop time. He sang with the big bands first, Harry James, then Tommy Dorsey. By 1942, he was a solo act, and teenage girls were screaming his name, fainting in the aisles, tearing at his clothes. They called it Sinatramania. It was the birth of modern celebrity, and Frank was at the center of it all. He had everything. The voice, the charm, the looks. He moved to Hollywood, starred in movies, won an Oscar for From Here to Eternity in 1953. He formed the Rat Pack with Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop. They owned Las Vegas. They drank, they gambled, they performed shows that became legend. Frank married some of the most beautiful women in the world. Ava Gardner, Mia Farrow. He dated dozens more. He lived large, spent wildly, gave generously. He was loyal to his friends, ruthless to his enemies, and never, ever backed down from a fight. He was Old Blue Eyes, the chairman of the board, the voice. He was untouchable, or so it seemed. But behind the tuxedos and the sold-out shows and the magazine covers, there was another story, a darker one. One that began long before he became a star, in the neighborhoods of Hoboken, where a young Frank Sinatra learned that sometimes, to get ahead, you needed help from people who didn't ask questions and didn't forget favors. The trouble started early, though no one called it trouble back then. In the 1930s and 40s, if you were a young Italian kid trying to make it in the entertainment business, you didn't have a lot of options. The doors were closed, the clubs were controlled, the record labels had their favorites, and breaking in meant knowing the right people. Frank's mother, Dolly, understood this. She was politically connected in Hoboken, knew the ward bosses, the union guys, the men who got things done. When Frank needed a push, she made calls. When he needed a gig, she found one. And some of those calls went to men whose business cards didn't say entertainment management. Frank got his first big break with the Harry James Orchestra in 1939. Then, Tommy Dorsey came calling with a better offer. By 1942, Frank wanted out of his contract with Dorsey to go solo, but Dorsey wouldn't let him go. The contract was ironclad and Frank was making him too much money. And then suddenly, mysteriously, Dorsey changed his mind. He released Frank from the contract for a pittance, $1 and a handshake, according to some versions of the story. Years later, rumors swirled about what had really happened, about a visit Dorsey received in the middle of the night, about a gun placed on his pillow, about a very persuasive conversation that left Dorsey convinced that letting Frank go was in everyone's best interest. Frank always denied it, called it fiction, said it was a scene from The Godfather, not real life. But the whispers never stopped, because the truth was, Frank Sinatra moved in circles where those kinds of favors were currency. He grew up around them. His mother knew them. And as his career took off, he never forgot the men who'd helped him along the way. By the 1950s, Frank was a fixture in the nightclubs of New York, Miami, and Las Vegas, cities where organized crime had deep roots. He performed at mob-owned venues. He socialized with men like Sam Giancana, the powerful Chicago mob boss. He was photographed with Lucky Luciano in Havana in 1947, a meeting that raised eyebrows in the press and got the attention of the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover opened a file on Frank Sinatra in 1943, and it would eventually grow to more than 2,000 pages. The FBI tracked his movements, his associations, his phone calls. They suspected him of being a courier, a facilitator, someone who helped powerful men move in powerful circles. Frank insisted he was just a singer, just a guy from Hoboken who loved his country, loved his friends, and never asked too many questions about where people made their money. But the reality was more complicated. The mob didn't just help Frank out of kindness. They expected loyalty. They expected access. They expected that when they called, Frank would answer. And he always did, because by then, he understood the unspoken rule. You don't say no to men like that, not if you want to keep singing. By the late 1950s, Frank Sinatra had clawed his way back from the edge of obscurity to become the biggest star in America. His career had nearly died in the early 50s. His voice gave out. His marriage to Ava Gardner collapsed. The press turned on him. The offers dried up. He was washed up at 37, a has-been who'd once been the biggest thing in the world. And then came From Here to Eternity. Frank fought for that role, the scrappy Italian soldier, Private Angelo Maggio. He took scale pay, a fraction of what he used to earn, just for the chance to prove he could still act. And when the movie came out in 1953, he wasn't just good. He was transcendent. He won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. The comeback was complete. His recording career exploded. Songs for young lovers, In the Wee Small Hours, Come Fly With Me. Albums that redefined what popular music could be. Intimate, sophisticated, emotionally complex. He wasn't just singing anymore. He was telling stories, painting moods, creating entire emotional landscapes in 3-minute songs. He formed Capitol Records' most successful partnership, then started his own label, Reprise Records, in 1960. He had total creative control. He could record what he wanted, when he wanted, how he wanted. He conquered Las Vegas. The Rat Pack shows at the Sands Hotel became the hottest ticket in America. Presidents came to see him. Royalty, Hollywood legends, everyone wanted to be in Frank's orbit. He had private jets, custom suits, expensive cars. He gave lavishly to charity, millions of dollars over the years. He supported civil rights causes at a time when it could have hurt his career. He insisted Sammy Davis Jr. be treated as an equal in every venue they played, even in the segregated South. He was powerful, successful, untouchable. Or so it seemed. But power came with strings. The mob wanted access to Frank's world. They wanted to be seen with him, legitimized by his fame. They wanted to gamble in his casinos, invest in his projects, use his connections. And they wanted favors. Sometimes it was small things. A phone call to a union boss, a meeting arranged with a politician, a word in the right ear at the right time. Sometimes it was bigger. In 1960, Frank campaigned hard for John F. Kennedy. He organized fundraisers, rallies, performances. He used his celebrity to bring out voters. He was so close to the Kennedy family that he expected to be part of the administration's inner circle. But after Kennedy won, something changed. Bobby Kennedy, the new Attorney General, was launching an aggressive campaign against organized crime, and Frank's associations, particularly with Sam Giancana, became a liability. In early 1962, President Kennedy was scheduled to stay at Frank's compound in Palm Springs. Frank had prepared for weeks. He built a helipad. He redecorated. He was thrilled to host the president. And then, at the last minute, the visit was canceled. JFK stayed at Bing Crosby's house. Instead, Bobby Kennedy had made it clear Frank's mob ties were too visible, too risky. The president couldn't be seen at his home. Frank was devastated, humiliated. He took a sledgehammer to the helipad he'd built. He never spoke to Peter Lawford, JFK's brother-in-law and fellow rat packer, again. But the real danger wasn't the political rejection. It was what came after. Sam Giancana was furious. He'd helped deliver votes in Chicago. He'd done favors for Frank, expecting that Frank's relationship with the Kennedys would protect him. Now, Bobby Kennedy was targeting him, and Frank was caught in the middle. Giancana wanted answers. He wanted Frank to use his influence to call off the dogs, but Frank had no influence anymore. The Kennedys had cut him loose, and Giancana didn't believe him. For years afterward, Frank lived with the fear that he'd angered the wrong people. He increased his security. He was careful about where he went, who he was seen with, what he said. He never spoke publicly about any of it. Not the favors, not the meetings, not the fear. But those close to him saw the toll. He drank more, slept less. He could be charming one moment and explosive the next. The anger, always simmering beneath the surface, flared more often. He married Mia Farrow in 1966. She was 21. He was 50. It lasted less than 2 years. Then, Barbara Marx in 1976. That one lasted until his death, but even she admitted Frank could be difficult, moody, distant. He was haunted by things he couldn't talk about, by debts he could never fully repay, by the knowledge that his success had come with invisible chains. It was 3:00 a.m. in Las Vegas, sometime in the mid-1960s. Frank sat alone in his suite at the Sands, a glass of Jack Daniels in one hand, a cigarette in the other. The show had ended hours ago. The crowds were gone. The casino floor was quieter now, just the die-hard gamblers and the cocktail waitresses moving through the smoky haze. Frank couldn't sleep. He rarely could anymore. He thought about the early days, about singing with Tommy Dorsey, about the girls screaming his name at the Paramount Theater, about believing, truly believing, that talent and hard work were all you needed to make it. He thought about the men who'd helped him, the ones who'd made calls, opened doors, smoothed over problems. He'd been grateful then. Young, naive maybe, he hadn't understood that every favor came with interest. The phone rang. Frank stared at it for a long moment before picking up. "Yeah." The voice on the other end was calm, polite, but there was no mistaking the authority behind it. "Frank, we need to talk. It's 3 in the morning. I know what time it is." Frank closed his eyes. He knew what this was about. Another favor, another request, another reminder that his success wasn't entirely his own. "What do you need?" The conversation lasted 5 minutes. When it ended, Frank hung up the phone and sat in the darkness, staring at nothing. He thought about walking away, retiring, moving somewhere quiet where no one knew his name and no one expected anything from him. But he knew he couldn't. The chains were invisible, but they were real. He was Frank Sinatra, Old Blue Eyes, the chairman of the board, and he would never be free. The breaking point came in 1967 at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas. Frank had a complicated relationship with the Sands. He'd been performing there since the 1950s. He'd made it famous. The Rat Pack had turned it into the most glamorous destination in Vegas. He had a piece of the ownership, a suite that was always available, and the run of the place. But by 1967, things were changing. Howard Hughes had bought the Sands. New management came in, new rules. They started treating Frank like an employee instead of a king. One night, Frank was gambling in the casino and asked for credit. The pit boss refused. Frank was furious. He'd been gambling there for years. He'd made them millions. And now they were cutting him off? He exploded. He drove a golf cart through the lobby. He smashed windows. He threatened staff. He demanded to see the manager. The situation escalated. Carl Cohen, a casino executive, got involved. Words were exchanged. And then Cohen did something almost no one had ever done. He punched Frank Sinatra in the face, knocked out 2 of his front teeth. Frank was shocked, humiliated, bleeding. He left the Sands that night and never came back. The story made headlines. Some people thought it was funny, the mighty Sinatra getting knocked down. Others saw it as sad, a man who'd built an empire losing control, realizing that even his power had limits. But for Frank, it was a moment of clarity. He'd spent decades believing he was untouchable, that his fame and his connections made him invincible. But he wasn't. He was still that kid from Hoboken, trying to prove he belonged. And the men who'd helped him along the way, the ones in the expensive suits, the ones who never forgot a favor, they didn't care about his fame or his Oscar or his sold-out shows. To them, he was just another asset, and assets could be replaced. Here's the truth about Frank Sinatra that most people never understood. He was the most famous singer in the world, and he was never free. He couldn't choose his friends without people questioning his judgment. He couldn't perform where he wanted without someone asking for a favor in return. He couldn't live quietly because the life he'd built required constant noise, constant performance, constant proof that he was still the chairman of the board. The mob connections followed him his entire life. The FBI file never closed. Journalists wrote exposés. Biographers speculated. Conspiracy theorists connected dots, real and imagined. Frank always denied it, got angry when people asked, threatened lawsuits, insisted it was all lies. But the truth was more nuanced. He wasn't a mobster. He didn't run operations or order hits or launder money, but he moved in their world. He accepted their help. He returned their favors. And once you're in that world, you don't just walk away. The cost wasn't just fear or paranoia or sleepless nights. It was the knowledge that his success, his legendary, world-changing success, wasn't entirely his own. That the doors that opened for him were opened by people who expected something in return. That the voice that made millions of people fall in love was also a voice that could be silenced if he said the wrong thing at the wrong time. Frank Sinatra lived until he was 82 years old. He performed almost until the end. He made more music, more memories, more headlines, but he never escaped the shadow. The men in the expensive suits, the late-night phone calls, the favors he couldn't refuse. He carried it all in silence, because that was the deal. And Frank Sinatra always honored his deals. Frank Sinatra died on May 14, 1998, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was 82 years old. His wife, Barbara, was by his side. So were his children, Nancy, Frank Jr., and Tina. He'd had a heart attack, and this time, his body couldn't recover. The world mourned. Presidents issued statements. Fellow musicians paid tribute. The lights on the Las Vegas Strip dimmed. The Empire State Building glowed blue in his honor. They remembered the voice, the movies, the Rat Pack, the swagger. They remembered old Blue Eyes, who sang about love and loneliness and living life on your own terms. But what they didn't see, what Frank never let them see, was the weight he carried, the invisible chains, the favors he couldn't refuse, the debts that never expired. He'd wanted to be free, to be just a singer, just a kid from Hoboken who loved music and wanted to share it with the world. But freedom, he learned, was a luxury he could never quite afford. They buried him in Desert Memorial Park in Cathedral City, California. His tombstone reads simply, "The best is yet to come." It was one of his signature songs, a declaration of optimism, a belief that no matter what, something better was waiting. Maybe in the end, he finally believed it. Maybe after 82 years of performing, of fighting, of owing, he finally found peace. Or maybe he just understood what so many people never do, that success always costs something. And sometimes, the price is paid in silence. Some stories aren't about the music or the fame or the legend. They're about the deals we make to get there, and the chains we wear that no one else can see. And some stories stay with us forever. If this quiet story touched you, feel free to subscribe and join us for more forgotten American lives.